Appreciate that. I have our next speaker on tap. I have the pleasure of introducing our own Will Fleming. I would be remiss if I didn't go through his accomplishments a little bit right now, because he is literally the ultimate entrepreneur. He's a business owner, an author, a DVD creator, podcast entrepreneur, national speaker, creator of the Certified Weightlifting Performance Coach through the NSPA. His athletic accomplishments is a All-American record holder at IU in the hammer throw. He is an Olympic trial participant and a national level Olympic weightlifter and a Masters weightlifting national champion with record holders on that. So I wanted to make sure I got through all that, but the biggest thing is when I think about Will, I think about his eagerness to learn and to help. And I know how much of an asset he is for us in our Indiana strength community, being an alum and always kind of being there to help, and in the Bloomington community as well. So you'll be hard pressed to find another person as passionate as well. So Will, the floor is yours, my man.
I'm going to share my screen real quick. And there we go. All right. So yes, thank you, Lainey. And Chris, that was awesome. I'm hard pressed to follow yours. I thought that was moving and I really enjoyed it. So thanks so much for having me. I'm going to set my timer real quick so I don't go over. All right. Okay. So today I gave a 90-minute presentation about this a couple weeks ago. So I'm going to try and distill it down into 10 minutes, which was actually a pretty cool thing. It's like, can you take something and squeeze it down into something, but like very small and condensed and still get across the big point. So today's is going to be the truth about velocity-based training. So obviously a huge buzzword recently. I can tell you the very first time that I saw it was in the old assembly hall weight room at Indiana University. We were hosting Big Tens in track and field, and we were our #1 rivals in track and field as throwers was a team from Iowa, and Iowa had great throwers. They were seeded first or second in every event, and we were seeded first or second in every single event. And so I kind of stuck around as one would try to do when a visiting team visits your weight room, and I wanted to see what they were doing. And I saw them roll in, and they had their Tendo unit, and they hooked it up. I had no clue what they were doing. This is circa 2004, and saw them hook it up, and I heard them say, well, he hit a speed PR. He's definitely going to PR at the meet tomorrow. And I kind of stuck that in my head. And yes, Iowa beat us in every single event at that Big Ten championships. So since that moment, I was really interested in this idea of velocity-based training. So why VBT? And here's going to be 4 really quick reasons that I think that VBT is really, really useful. And more so than just numbers are good. We're going to go a little deeper than that. So velocity doesn't lie, right? So if you've been looking in VBT, and if you've read Brian Mann's book, he references a study where there's an 18% plus or minus difference in how an athlete might perceive a weight on any given day. And what that really looks like, and if you've ever lifted a weight in your life, you know this to be true, right? If you have a program and written on there is 80%, some days it feels like way more than 80%, and some days it feels like way less than 80%. And that is intuitive. Everybody who's lifted a weight for more than a couple months knows that some days you feel great and some days you don't. And they put a number to it that is actually 18%. So if you think about that, if you programmed an 80%, or better yet, if you programmed a 90% lift, which is a pretty heavy day for most athletes, if there's 18% on the plus side, it's going to feel like 108%, and that's going to bury that athlete on that given day. But if you wanted a 90% stimulus, if it felt like 72% on the other end of the spectrum, that's not nearly as intense as you wanted out of that day. So velocity is true, right? It stays the same as an athlete progresses. So what is at one time, the speed at which you can move 80% is nearly always going to be the speed at which you can move 80%, even if your 80% increases by 50 kilograms, right? If your 80% goes up, 80% still going to move at 80% speeds. And so when we talk about comparing velocity to other things like RPE or percentage base We talked about it being better than percentage based, but RPE depends on an athlete's knowledge, experience, and truthfulness, right? I've had athletes who, if you try and program an RPE, if you told them 8, they would run through the wall and get crushed, and they might miss a lift, and they'd go, "Oh, that's about a 7, coach. I got more in me," And rep maxes depend on an athlete's individual personality. A lot of athletes will just some will say, "Well, that's good for the day," and some will just keep pounding, eventually getting too fatigued. So velocity is going to be a constant no matter what. Velocity is the ultimate method of auto-regulation, which is such a big topic. It responds to daily fluctuations of an athlete. This slide's not in here, but in my longer presentation it is. I use a muscle snatch, which is a really simple Olympic lift variation. And I use a muscle snatch and take the peak velocity of that as a function of readiness on a daily basis, right? And each athlete has their own profile, and we can kind of get into this is a good day, this is a great day, and this is a bad day. So it is auto-regulation. There was a study recently, velocity-based training over percentage-based training led to significantly increased jump heights and bench press over percentage-based training. So and that's a whole goal of VBT, is that you are choosing the exact correct load on a given day for what the athlete is ready to do. So VBT is a perfect method for auto-regulation. Velocity is a cue to your athletes. I think anybody who's trained with velocity knows that athletes, if they're chasing a number, right, which we don't want to get them too wrapped up in that, but if they chase a number, they're pulling faster, they're going, they're attacking the weights in a little different way. And we know that external cues outperform internal cues, which is part of Wolf's research. And then velocity is the ultimate results-based external cue. So if you think about the idea of an external cue as being what happens as the result or the external, that number is the best external cue, because it's not just feel and it's not your eyes, it's a real thing, right? And intentionally moving the bar as fast as possible is really, really good. And one of the other pieces, which a lot of velocity-based software is doing now, is that feedback on each rep about the velocity actually helps athletes improve faster. So I had a group that was doing some velocity-based training when we were in quarantine. One was training in pairs, and they were shouting out speeds to one another. And another had a unit, and they were just kind of seeing speeds after the after the set or the rep. They would go over and take a look, and the athletes who were shouting out the speeds to one another were actually getting better faster, and that mirrors what this Nagata study said as well. And then higher velocity is a good thing, right? So training at the fastest speeds possible on each rep made athletes significantly stronger. That's Gonzalez-Badillo. And that's, that Gonzalez-Badillo lab has like so many cool things in there that I can't even touch on in this, but if you go look them up on like ResearchGate as a lab, they're putting out super cool stuff. But training at the fastest speeds possible on each rep made people significantly stronger. So that goes back in the day when I was first taught to lift, everybody said, just go as fast as possible, right? And that isn't as good, because target speeds are more effective than the broad go fast cue. So if you tell an athlete to move something 1 meter per second, they're going to go faster than if you just say go as fast as possible. So we have to give them a little more specificity. So those are the 4 reasons velocity-based training is really good. This is one of my favorite quotes, because a lot of times when people talk about velocity-based training, they're like, now the number is the coach, I'm no longer the coach, right? And I'm worried about that being taken away from me, and I want to, I still want to have input in the program. I don't want the athletes just chasing the number, they got to listen to me. And Brian Mann said, velocity is another coach on the floor, not the coach on the floor, which I think is really appropriate. Another thing when we talk about technique over velocity. So once you implement velocity-based training, we do not want to evaluate velocity without proper technique in place. And good technique actually creates more speed. So if we're talking about Olympic lifts, you can see on the right that bad idea is the athlete throwing their shoulders back. That's a technique people will falsely use to try and go faster. And it doesn't really work, right? It actually slows the bar down, because good technique is what ultimately makes the bar go fast. We have to differentiate between athlete go, like, the athlete moving their shoulders quickly versus the bar actually moving quickly. So what turns out to be the truest, fastest way to move is to drive with your legs and get vertical extension like the athlete's doing on the left-hand side. This is a really, when we start talking about weightlifting and strength training movements, speed is dependent upon distance. And this is from R.A. Roman's training of the weightlifter, Olympic lifts. If the farther the bar has to move, the faster it must go to get there. So tall people have to move stuff faster. So think about that when we talk about work and power outputs in a session. A taller person's going to have to work harder to reach similar velocities, right? All right, so here's a sample-based velocity program. I'm coming into it pretty late, but this is what we've been doing with our athletes and seeing huge improvements, is taking a minimum velocity threshold and then basing all their program off that minimum velocity threshold. So all you need is that one high-end number, which is the number at which they can still make it, but they're not going to miss it. And in our base week, we're doing something that's 7.5 to 10% over the MVT. In the loading week, we're going to do 5% to 7.5% over MVT. Week 3 is we're going to go greater than 10%, and we're just changing the sets and reps. We call it Speed Buster week. And then the final week is our PR week, and we're going to have 2.5 to 5% over MVT, over the minimum velocity threshold, unless an athlete really wants to PR, and then we may even go to that MVT. But we're just cycling percentages over the MVT on a weekly basis, and we repeat that. So that if there's a high rep cycle, then a lower rep cycle. That's what we're doing with velocity, and it's done huge stuff for my athletes. So very last thing, training with velocity doesn't unlock some secret training that looks unlike normal smart training. It looks just like smart training with a better variable. So anyways, follow me on Instagram or email me through my website at willfleming.com. I barely went over 10 minutes, right?
I don't know, Tom, did you go over 10 minutes?
Will, barely. I mean, I had you at like 10:32. So, but I mean, you could claim 9 something because Virch went 10:27 and he claims he went 9:30. So let's see.
I'll claim under.
Will, that was an awesome presentation. Every conversation you've ever had with our staff is extremely thought-provoking, and it has you leaving the room with all sorts of ideas, typically ones that lead to me implementing it with my team. So thanks once again for sharing your research and laying it out there for us. Next up,